Afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Lewis of Brian Lewis Sports Talk, BLST. Welcome aboard. This will be my first episode of the new media entity. I have a mock draft already up there, which I will be covering later in the week. I have to go a little more in depth on that because there are some picks that will move around, and plus we have a combine preview as well. So I'm really excited for that. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Cardinals, the team that will be holding the number one pick in this year's 2019 NFL Draft. In a draft that really isn't a great year to have a number one pick. We'll talk about that. Now, also, we're gonna look into Arizona's roster situation and figure out if there's some holes. Well, there are plenty of holes in this case. But we're going to figure out where the holes are and maybe where they can find some solutions to solve the problem. We're also going to assess their front office situation with Steve Keim and maybe why they hired Cliff Kingsbury, because that was a very controversial hire. And then we'll take a look at, the roster and what their expectations could be for next year based on some of the moves they could make. So let's start with this front office situation in Arizona, because most teams that hire new coaches tend to have new front offices, or at least newly appointed front offices. The exception to the rule tends to really be Baltimore right now with Eric DeCosta keeping John Harbaugh around. But keep in mind, DeCosta has also been with the Ravens for the better part of over a decade to almost 15 years plus. So there's a difference of opinion there. I mean, look at Miami with Chris Greer. They hired Brian Flores. You look at some other regimes around the league, and every GM change has led to a coaching change. It's and even Cleveland with John Dorsey, he got his way, and now Freddie Kitchens is in charge. So all those little things that happen. Now, granted, a lot of controversy with the Josh Rosen draft pick last year for Arizona. A lot of people are down on Rosen, but I also see that a lot of people look at Cliff Kingsbury and don't see kind of the whole picture here. We could argue whether he deserves to have an NFL head coaching job or not. I'm not going to sit here and discuss that. But what Arizona may see in the whole grand scheme of things is that with Vance Joseph running the defense, and I think that's been something that's been understated from Arizona's front, because I think Vance Joseph as a defensive coordinator had success in Miami with a really good group, a group of guys that now are all over the league. Guys like Xavier Howard, who are in the Pro Bowl this year, Rashad Jones, who's a pretty talented safety. They got those two young linebackers in Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan. They had Sue. They had Fairley, I believe. No, not in Miami. But I forget what team. They had another defensive tackle, that Randy Starks, Cameron Wake. They drafted Charles Harris. So they have talent on that Miami team to play with. And he was there 3 years ago. So they obviously had a different group of guys there. But you look at Miami now, and they have a talented group. So it's most of the guys that were there when he was there. My whole point with this thing with Vance Joseph, you look at Chandler Jones, Deion Buchanan if he comes back, those two safeties in Bethea and Buda Baker. You have Patrick Peterson, the recently signed Robert Alford. I think Vance Joseph can make that work. If they can find a way to keep Deion Buchanan and somehow get some offensive line help this offseason in any which way, shape, or form, then that's a successful offseason. The Cardinals are only going to have just over $40 million to spend. Granted, there's not really much leeway for them to get more cap space unless they were to trade Patrick Peterson, which the organization seems like they don't want to do that. Larry Fitzgerald will be an $11 million cap hit. So will Patrick Peterson. Maybe they can figure out something with Swearinger. DJ Humphries gets extended. I'm sure that'll help them a little bit. But if that doesn't happen, then the Cardinals are really just going to have to stand pat and hope they can get some short-term prove-it deals, or maybe get like one big free agent, possibly someone like Trent Brown from the Patriots if he's available. You can offer DJ Humphries in a trade, maybe get something for him if that's the case. They got to make a decision on exactly what the future of that franchise is going to be at that, and especially on the offensive line, because you have a running back that's making $10 million a year, a wide receiver that's getting old in Larry Fitzgerald, a young receiver in Christian Kirk that you want to get the ball, a tight end in Ricky Seals-Jones who's kind of explosive, And then you have a quarterback in Josh Rosen who has the ability to get those guys the ball. Presumably, if all those other things hold, he should be able to do his job easier. So why not do what the Rams did and build it around the quarterback, cater to the quarterback, instead of having the quarterback try to cater to the rest of the talent? Because Rosen isn't quite that talent. I said that last year in the draft. There were no quarterbacks in last year's draft that are going to be able to like make an offense single-handedly. They all need certain pieces to succeed, especially Rosen, seeing that he didn't have much of that in UCLA either. So it just seems to be an ongoing problem. Now, we go to the draft because, as I mentioned before, I don't see Arizona being huge players in free agency because of the stipulations, the $40 million, and the fact that they have to kind of prepare for the long haul when it comes to building this offense with guys like David Johnson, Christian Kirk. They have to kind of build this thing because the offensive line's not going to do itself. Now they could hold on. They could have Will Holden become a right tackle, Mason Cole at center. They're going to keep Justin Pugh around because they have him for a huge contract. That's 3 out of 5 pieces. If they can somehow extend DJ Humphries, that's 4, and then maybe you can pick a tackle, or even like a guard in the late first round, early second round. Someone like maybe Elston Jennings can play interior guard. Chris Lidstrom from Boston College. Michael Jordan from Ohio State. There's just a couple big linemen in this draft. Cody Ford from Oklahoma, although I think he's going to go wicked high. He projects to be a really good guard. We're going to see how it all works out with Arizona, but we're going to start with the number 1 pick, and I think it's a rather easy selection. In my opinion, I think it's a rather very easy selection because there's only really 2 guys you can pick with these top 2 picks, and it's Josh Allen of Kentucky. Even though I don't really buy into Josh Allen as much, I think Josh is a good player, but to me, it almost screams like these edge rushers that get overdrafted every year. Guys like Deion Jordan, Dante Fowler, and I love Dante Fowler coming out too. But there's a big difference in Josh Allen and Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is ahead of where Joey was when he came out in 2016. In fact, I think Nick Bosa is the one guy in this draft. If you're going to take him at number 1, he can plug and play almost instantly in that defense that Vance Joseph has set up. A 4-3 that can get after the quarterback, especially with those 3 inside backers, depending on what they're going to do with Deion Buchanan. That's a big free agent move for them. If they keep Buchanan and somehow keep him around and can utilize his skills, that becomes a different dynamic on defense because now they can play more of a nickel base as opposed to with the 5 defensive backs having to be the nickel, as opposed to, we may have to go out and get a couple more corners despite the fact we just got Robert Alford. So a lot at play here. But I think Nick Bosa ends up with the number 1 pick. If they decide to trade down, or they can trade down, it's not really going to be they decide. They got to get an offer. Now, there's 3 teams that I exhibited in my blog that may be able to make a deal, depending on other circumstances. The long shot would be Cincinnati, because Cincinnati's at like 10 or 11 or 12. And I know Denver's in that realm as well, but Denver may just decide to sit at number 10, and they don't do anything. That's fine. They can do that. They have Flacco. We'll see where that goes. As far as the Bengals go, Andy Dalton could be moved. A.J. Green could be moved. Geno Atkins. I'm not ruling anything out with the Bengals because it seems like they're completely in demolition mode. And if the Bengals are available at the right price, this could hamper Pittsburgh's market for Antonio Brown that much more, which we'll talk about when we get to Cincinnati and Pittsburgh a little bit more in depth. Because A.J. Green, if he's on the open market, would probably be able to get some of those teams that may want Antonio Brown to preemptively give up less to get A.J. Green. Never mind the fact that, A.J. doesn't have the melodrama, tag that A.B. has had, even though the Steelers kind of gave him that tag to kind of, spite him, I guess. So there's a whole different situation there. Now, I did see something online saying that the Arizona Cardinals could trade for Antonio Brown. If the Cardinals traded for Antonio Brown, the Cardinals would probably want to go get Nick Foles and go compete for this freaking thing because they would have a very good receiving core. And their defense would be competitive enough, even with their offensive line being as below average as it is. They could just draft linemen the whole way through and have a good team. But I just don't see that dream scenario, and I don't see the Bengals being able to get a good haul in return of all the guys they have. Geno Atkins would be tough to move, especially in the third year of a 5-year extension. A.J. Green would be tough to move, considering the injury history that A.J. Green has had. Also considering Gio Bernard as well. Never mind, running backs don't go for much. They don't really have a great offensive line. Carlos Dunlap's a free agent, so that almost ruins the value. Vontaze Burfict's on the way out. Drake Kirkpatrick at best is an eh. So there's not really much else they can really do, but that's an outflyer that I'll throw out there. Another one being, the Giants and the Jags for obvious reasons. The Giants with Dwayne Haskins would be almost a perfect fit, in my opinion. The Jaguars with Dwayne Haskins might be a bit of a rougher fit, but I think Dwayne has all the talent that they may want. So those two teams are going to duke it out. They probably have packages. And the thing is, if the Giants or Jags make that deal, that's basically telling the rest of the NFL that they believe the one thing that's holding them back from the playoffs is that quarterback position, and that Dwayne Haskins, Drew Lock, Kyler Murray, whoever those teams draft with that pick is the guy that's going to take them to the playoffs. So that's a big scenario. Now, with all that being said, there's a lot to hope for a trade-up. So I don't know if that's the direction they'll go. But we'll say this. Arizona takes Nick Bosa, number 1. No trade down. At number 33, they try to get a tackle. Now, the guys that could be available on the board, guys like Andre Dillard, offensive guards like Dalton Risner, Elgin Jennings, Chris Lidstrom, those guys could be available. That's where they'd have to go round 2. And the thing is, they could trade back up into the first round and get Greg Little, Yanni Kayus, if Jawan Taylor falls for some reason, if Jonah Williams falls for some reason, if Cody Ford falls for some reason, they got to be able to get one of these linemen. They need to have a draft that can set the tone for them on both sides of the ball. Defensively, if they re-sign Buchanan, they could probably get the job done defensively with the group they have, considering they just brought in Alford. And if they can draft Nick Bosa, then they won't miss Marcus Golden all that much. Marcus Golden, I mean. So that's pretty much it for the Cardinals. I say no matter what they do, they're still going to be a 5, 6, 7-win football team next year because I just don't have any faith in Steve Keim to be able to get this thing done. Now, if they can somehow trade back and get a decent deal to trade back with 6 or 7, the Jaguars or the Giants, and they can get 2 offensive linemen with the early picks, someone like maybe Jonah Williams, Jawan Taylor at number 7, and then maybe Dalton Risner at 33, that changes the entire ballgame because now you have 2 guys who I project as starters at offensive line and 2 guys that'll be able to join DJ Humphries, Justin Pugh, and Will Holden on the offensive line. Now, we'll see what happens. I mean, Mason Cole, and then